You are listening to the PensNation radio show on thepensnation.com. Follow us on Twitter at thepensnation.
You are listening to the first edition of the regular season right here on the PensNation radio show. This is our first time going on the air after the regular season began. Obviously, we're 2 games in. I'm Andy Hughes. I'll be hosting tonight here along with Nick Richter and our good friend Josh Yohe in review. Josh, how you doing tonight?
I'm very well, gentlemen. How are you?
Very well.
Yeah, splendid.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty crazy summer with all the changes to this team, as we all know. And, starting with 11 goals in the first 2 games and a 2-0 start against, a pretty impressive showing, I guess, considering the circumstances. I mean, you had a new GM, a new coach, a new system. They put out, these past 2 games, they had forwards that only 2 of the forwards in that lineup were Penguin draft picks, which is Crosby and Malkin. So clearly a lot of change here on this team. And I guess, it's early, but I think a 2-0 is a nice start for Mike Johnston's coaching career in the NHL.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Mike Johnston couldn't have drawn up a much better script. I know it's only 2 games. I know it's only, sorry, my neighbor's dog just barked at me, scared the crap out of me. But,
I don't speak Spanish.
I know it's only 2 games, but I feel like, the Penguins look very impressive. And I wasn't sure what to expect before that Anaheim game. Wasn't real impressed with what I saw in the preseason. Anaheim's one of the best teams in the league. You're thinking, oh boy, this could be a long night for the home opener. But Penguins took it to them all night, and I was really, really impressed. And I know the penalty killing hasn't been good, but you can always work on that. And otherwise, I think everything's been very impressive.
Now, were you at all surprised, Josh, with the quick start that they had offensively? I guess one would think that you would have to, work through a couple things first, but they kind of came out flying right off the bat, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and especially with, Malkin having no training camp and Crosby only having half of a training camp. You're kind of thinking, well, it's probably going to take those guys a little while to get it going, and especially in Crosby's case, just because historically he's a slow starter. Last season he had 14 points in his first 7 games, but other than that, he usually has quiet Octobers. But we could see from really his first couple of shifts against the Ducks, he was absolutely flying. And it was pretty evident to me right away that we can talk about his wrist all we want, but there clearly was something else wrong with him in the playoffs last year. Perhaps it was fatigue. I don't know what it was, but if you just look at that burst of speed he had on that first goal against the Ducks, I mean, I haven't seen that burst of speed from him in a while, and it was certainly, I think, a refreshing thing to see. And I'm pretty convinced that even though the Penguins will likely go out to get another winger or 2, I don't think scoring goals is going to be a real big problem for this team.
No, definitely not. And you talked about that speed that we saw from Crosby, and Jesse Marshall had an interesting article today kind of talking about Chris Kunitz and Patrick Hornquist on that line, kind of creating space there right in the middle of the ice, allowing Crosby to shoot up right the middle and then, send that pass right the middle while he's flying. And, the defensemen are just way out of position and can't get to him because he's going so fast. I mean, talk about Kunitz and Hornquist. I mean, I don't think we saw that to be, the first line. We thought maybe Hornquist would start with Malkin, but Chris Kunitz and Patrick Hornquist, they're doing a lot of good things. Hornquist already with 2 goals. Kunitz has a goal already, and obviously Crosby with 3. That's been a pretty productive line and one that, is a really hard-working line.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me that the Penguins, once upon a time, acquired James Neal to be Sidney Crosby's winger, and Malkin made it back into the lineup before Crosby did, who was still out with the concussions, and all of a sudden Malkin and Neal had this incredible chemistry, and Crosby and Neal really never did play together. And now you fast forward to this season, and the Penguins acquired Hornquist largely to be Evgeny Malkin's winger, and all of a sudden you're starting to see some chemistry between he and Crosby, and frankly, Hornquist is exactly the kind of player Crosby likes playing with. I've been referring to him as a right-handed Chris Kunitz. I think they're fairly similar players. Could this be the Penguins' top line moving forward? Why not? I actually think it probably could be. I really do. I'm impressed, and obviously they need a winger or 2. at some point in that top 6, I don't think it's fair for Malkin just to have Pascal Dupuis and really nobody else on that second line, because I think Sutter's eventually going to be the third line center. But no, it's a really impressive line. They keep things simple, as you would expect, and that's exactly the way Crosby likes to play. And that's when he's at his most effective. He doesn't like playing with perimeter players as much. And my God, Hornquist and Kunitz are anything but perimeter players. That line's going to score an incredible amount of dirty goals for a highly skilled, productive line.
One of the things that I don't think a lot of fans were expecting from Patrick Hornquist was how quick that release is. I mean, we saw that in Game 1 where Crosby wins that faceoff right back to him, and he just gets rid of it so quickly. He's got a little bit of James Neal in him and a little bit of Chris Kunitz, and it's kind of the perfect blend. It complements them so well. But what he really brings, like what you were talking about, just that net front presence, those dirty goals, and that's something the Pens haven't had for a long time, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Hornquist, he just knows his role, and he knows who he is. He's very comfortable in his own skin. And I said before the season I thought he could score 30 goals with the Penguins this season, and I've seen nothing in a couple of games in training camp to make me think otherwise. And you have to remember, when he was playing in Nashville, and those were some terrible offensive teams, he really never had a playmaking center to play with, certainly not of Crosby's caliber, but I mean, he didn't even have an adequate playmaking center down there, to be quite honest. Scoring goals was always a problem for the Predators. So, I mean, he's not a guy whose talent just, jumped out at you like maybe James Neal's would at times. But he's very good, and I'm interested to see ultimately what the Penguins are trying to do with this power play, if they're going to keep the 4-forward, 1 defenseman look, or if they're going to put Ehrhoff back out there at some point. Because if they do, you have to remove either Hornquist or Kunitz from the net front position, and I'm not sure which one you take out. Nothing against Kunitz, but Chris is 35 now. I think you might want to watch his minutes a little bit. Hornquist is a younger man, and just from watching him every day during training camp and practice, man, is he good in front of the net. It's one thing just to have the desire to go to the net, which a lot of guys have, but to actually know what to do in front of the net is another story. And this guy is just really nifty in front of the net. I like everything about his game.
The Pens would be wise to put Christian Ehrhoff on that first power play, wouldn't they? I mean, if they're trying to sell him to stay here in Pittsburgh, wouldn't it kind of behoove them to kind of give him added opportunities?
Couldn't agree more. Nothing against Chris Letang. I'm a big Chris Letang fan, but I also don't think he's especially good on the power play. I never have. It just doesn't come naturally to him. And Ehrhoff is just a natural on the power play. He's just got a wonderful shot. He shoots the puck a ton, which I think is a good thing for the Penguins' power play, quite frankly. If anything, it does have the tendency to get a little too pretty at times, and I think Letang is one of the guys who is most guilty of that. Ehrhoff, man, he gets the puck and he shoots it. And to me, you went out and you got Ehrhoff in a surprise move in free agency, so why wouldn't you put him on the top power play? It's what he does best. He's a good 5-on-5 player. I don't think he's a great 5-on-5 player. I think what makes him special is his ability to contribute to the power play. So I think either he should be out there in place of Letang, or honestly, I think I kind of like the idea of both of them out there together.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I'd love to see Ehrhoff out there. He's got a rocket from the point. Would like to see that. Going back to the forwards a little bit here, you mentioned earlier about the second line there, and we've seen Brandon Sutter be the second line center with Malkin on the wing. Mike Johnson has already said, this isn't really a long-term thing, but for the time being, Brandon Sutter playing pretty well, even going back to last year's playoffs. I mean, he was one of the best forwards on that Penguins team already with 2 goals, 2 games into the season. What have you thought about that line? I mean, Dupuis obviously had the great game on opening night. Brandon Sutter has had 2 goals, and then Malkin only has 3 shots recorded so far this season, but didn't have that goal last game on the wing.
Yeah, Brandon Sutter's a different player. It's very clear to me that the success he had in the playoffs just, did everything for him in terms of confidence. He believes he's a goal scorer now, and he's one of those guys. He doesn't score ugly goals. Like every time Brandon Sutter scores a goal, you find yourself saying, wow, that was a great shot. That was a goal scorer's goal. I mean, he really does have that ability, and I don't see this as a long-term thing. I've never really envisioned Sutter and Malkin as line mates. They play very different games, very different styles. But here's the plan. When everybody's healthy, the Penguins want Sutter and Bo Bennett to be two-thirds of a third line that is kind of an offensive-minded puck possession type of third line. And that's fine. I think that will work. But eventually the Penguins need to go out and get Evgeny Malkin a winger. Pascal Dupuis's fine, but they could really use one more. And if they do that, then I really think they're in business. I think the forward unit could look really, really impressive. But until then, we'll see. The Penguins aren't a complete team quite yet. I think Jim Rutherford's definitely going to go out and make a deal at some point between now and March. I'd be shocked if he didn't. I think everybody knows the Penguins need one more goal-scoring winger. But that said, if Sutter and Malkin are going to work for now, heck yeah, you leave them together. And the beauty of Pascal Dupuis is he can play with anybody in any situation and make it work.
Josh, would you rather see them get like that pure kind of James Neal sniper guy, or would you like to see them get another guy kind of similar to Hornqvist and Kunitz for Malkin?
Well, that's a good question. Tough to say. I mean, I think they could use either. Ideally, just looking at the Penguins lineup, I would like to see them. I don't know who's going to be available, but I'd like it to be somebody who's more of a bigger guy.
Yeah.
I just look at the Penguins forwards. There's not a lot of size there. And that's a real concern of mine. Even though they beat Anaheim on opening night, Anaheim looked like a football team compared to them at times. And, there's only so many Milan Lucics out there and guys like that. But a big power forward, I think, could go a long way in helping the Penguins. I know they have Kunitz and Hornqvist as net front presences, but if they could get one more guy who's a big guy who can score, I think that would probably be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen we talked a lot about the bottom six coming into the season, the improved bottom six, and Nick Spaulding, Steve Downey, Blake Como. He's already got a goal in a Penguin uniform. What about those guys? I mean, what have you seen from them that's impressed you so far? Obviously, a lot better than last year's bottom six, but I think that kind of happened by default.
Well, yeah, when you start at the bottom, you can only go one place, and that was the issue with the bottom six last year. I actually wrote an article in the Trib the other day, and I mentioned some of these guys in the bottom six specifically because of what I saw in that Anaheim game. And I know you guys will recall late in the game, Brian Kessler took a bit of a shot at Crystal Tang, probably an unnecessary one. And Blake Como and Steve Downey just went nuts and confronted him immediately. And then Zach Still got into a fight a couple of minutes later. And, I'm sitting there in the press box thinking, man, I didn't see that one time last year. Mm-hmm. And you go back to the playoffs and the abuse Crosby took from Mark Stahl and Brandon Dubinsky, and the Penguins never really answered it. And it was kind of shocking at the time, and it remains so. And they've got some guys now who, they're not going to put up with that. And I asked some of the Penguins, the day after that game about the incident, and in particular, Sidney Crosby and Crystal Tang, said absolutely it was a problem last year. They came right out and said, yes, it was a huge problem. And, now it appears to be largely resolved by guys who are going to take care of their stars a little better. And that's an incredibly important thing because, you can have an improved bottom six, and sure, they are. I mean, there's no doubt. But the Penguins are still going to win a Stanley Cup at the end of the day because of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. You need those guys to be healthy and taken care of, and they've got guys who are willing to do that now, I believe.
Is this locker room right now, we've talked a lot about this before. It was a quiet locker room last year and the year before, maybe even. Is it any different this year with some of these new guys coming in? Is it at all different, I guess?
Well, yeah, a little bit. I can tell it's early to say that for sure, but I can tell you that the new guys have very much been accepted. Steve Downey might have a history for, being a guy who goes a little over the line at times, that kind of thing, but boy, his teammates love him. I mean, he's just fit right in right away. He's kind of like a character from Slapshot, just the way he talks. He's kind of an old school guy, and his teammates love him. Como is a really respected veteran. And Hornqvist is a guy in particular. He's one of those guys. He is not afraid to speak. If he thinks something needs to be said, he'll say it. He has a real quiet confidence about him. So, yeah, I think it probably is a better locker room. The new guys have very much been accepted. And, no, it's got a little bit of a different feel in there this year. Last season, things just felt stale, and they really did. And it was kind of a joyless room last year. We've used that word a lot, and it really was. And I don't get that feeling at all this season. There's definitely more of an energy.
Yeah, well, before the season, there was a lot of